G'day, I'm on light duties at the moment as I've managed to injure my leg and I can't bend and move as well as I normally do, so I thought I'd do a few of the smaller jobs that have been accumulating in the shed for a while. One of them is this, the shaft you may recognise from my shafted video, but there's a retaining clip that goes in here, and to put the groove in and to put the clip in is a few minutes work. But the problem here was not so much doing that, but supporting it while I did that. This end I grabbed in the lathe chuck, this end had to be supported on the centre. Now I've got one of the sets of centres with removable tips, but unfortunately this one doesn't quite fit. It's too small, and so I had to make up another one, which I've done. That there, so I've made that up, but that was actually a lot more effort than I thought it would be. So this video just runs through basically the steps that I took to make that, and it shows a few ways of setting things up, and hopefully it'll be of use to people, and some of the mistakes I've made or errors I made, or hopefully that'll be of use to people to not what to do. Here's a lump of mystery metal, roughly 50 millimeters in diameter. I did think about making a smaller centre, but then I thought, well, the one I've got is 32, what's the point of going to 40? I might as well go to 50, which is a whole 2 inches. I've centred it up in the forejaw here, but right on this end, and the reason for that is that I want to put a centre as close as I can to that end. I'm then going to flip it around and put a centre in the other end, and that way I can do a little bit of clean up on this thing, using the centres and dialing it in, and I'll be good. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up part way, but I'm going to leave my cut where I know I'm going to be taking off a lot of material, and that way when I flip it over I can grab it on the machined up part, I can run it down to that cut, and if I've got a slight mismatch in diameters it's not going to matter because I'm going to be removing that material anyway. Having put the centre in as close as I'm able to the true centre, I've now gone back and trued up the work back here, making sure I've got a gap between the face of the chuck and the end of the bar stock here, because that may not be square. What I'm now going to do is do a clean up cut, and then I can flip that around and I can then clean up the rest of it, and that'll give me then a good working surface that I can then do all my other operations based on that concentricity. So in the previous sequence you saw me use the vacuum cleaner to suck away the dust and the rust that was coming off this bit of bar. Don't really want that in my lathe, it's far easier to pull it off that way. I'm now going to use this same tool, and it relies on the machine axis being square, to come in and at least partially face this so that I've got then a step that I can use to locate against the chuck. So as a result I've now got this surface here, or the majority of this surface here. There's still a little bit where the centre was in the way, I couldn't get in, but that is now square to the axis of the work, and this is parallel to the axis of the work. So I've now got a basis for turning this around and doing all sorts of bits and pieces to get the stock prepared. This is now recentered, and that square face is hard up against the chuck, so I know that the axis of that is where I want it. You can see here that there's a little bit of discoloured material, rust oxide, whatever you want to call it, there. I may have to do another clean up pass, but at the moment that's good enough. I can still use this surface to dial it in, and I've got that pretty much dead nuts on. Some of you may have noticed this down here. Unfortunately, I flipped this around. I was trying to drill a centre and I had the speed too low, and so the end of my centre broke off. It's not a pretty thing, but it's a worthwhile reminder that when you're drilling, you can't, with a small diameter, you can go too slow. You have to keep your speed up. Alternately, you have to feed gently, and I didn't feed gently enough, and this is the consequence I now have to live with. But my material is a little bit oversized, so I'm going to be able to turn that off, and hopefully I'll just be able to knock that centre out. So there we go. I've managed to turn that out. I think there's a little bit left in there, but I'll get a scriber into there. That's it, probably. And it looks like the hole is still good enough that I can probably even use that to recenter. So I'll have a look at that, see what my length is like. I might just decide to part off and restart, or then again, if my length is close to what I wanted, I might just see how I go restarting on that existing divot. Just to make sure that I've got everything running true after mucking around with the end here, I've set up the dial, reclocked the back, in case there's a little bit of movement there from the sideways forces on the end. Sorted that out, and now I'm going around and just checking what the alignment is like on the front end here. If that's out a little bit, that's better. So the back end is clocked in. The front end, the tailstock end, is, I've tapped that in so that it's sitting square in there. I can now come along and re-drill my centre. It's always safer to re-drill than try and pick up an old centre. In this case I had a little bit of space. If I didn't, as I said, I would have re-drilled in the centre that was there, but there's always a risk with doing that you might be slightly off, so it's better to start from scratch. Once I've got that done, I can then finish my clean up here and actually start on the piece itself. I've now turned down the bar till I get a spigot on the back, which is the same as the large diameter on this taper. Now, if I was setting this up for a large taper, I'd set up my taper turning attachment, which is fitted to the lathe, and get everything sorted out that way. But this is only a small taper, so I can use the cross slide forward if I want to, which I will do. The question is how to set that up. Now, what I'm going to do is, this is one of the little insertable centres. What I can do is put that in the centre I've already got, wind my tailstock in, and then I should be able to run a dial indicator up there and twist my compound around, and when that zeroes out, I should have that taper. Interesting little trick. If I set my indicator on the back side of that, it means I'm moving the compound this way. And so that means if I want to get a socket that will fit into, which is just the right size, if I put on the back of the work like that and then set up my compound so that, you know, when I wind the indicator along it goes to 0, I get a socket. If I put on this side where my cutting tool is, I get the spigot. So it's a handy thing to remember. If you have to make a socket for a Morse taper or something like that, you could use this method. Put the indicator on the back, and you'll have a Morse taper socket. For those of you not familiar with the method, you're basically running your indicator along the surface of what you're trying to duplicate using the compound slide. So if I wind this along here, that needle will move pretty much bugger all. And in fact, I think the movement I'm getting there is from the screw on the compound rather than anything else. So effectively, I've got that taper on this cross slide. I can now come along with the tool and just take a bit of that off, and I should get a nice matching taper which will go into the socket. So after a bit of effort, here it is. Fits quite nicely. I should point out that I had to have a second go at this because I didn't have the taper quite set right. So sometimes it's a good idea when doing these things to do a practice piece just to check what your taper's like. But that goes on there, and minimal wobble, which is what we want. So now all I need to do is just sort of work out what I'm going to do for a land here, and then come in and clean that up, part that off. This is the final stage of things. So I've parted a groove off in there, and now I'm using a I think it's a right hand knife tool mounted backwards to take this down. That's going to be around about 6mm, and then it's going to slope down. I'm going to have to start destroying some of that, I'm afraid. I was trying not to, but oh well, that's the way it works. Just for the clearance, and then that'll give me something going from 50mm down to about 25. After doing multiple passes with my tool there, compound set on 30 degrees, this is what I've got. I've got a little bit of a polish. I'm not going to take that finely down to size, because what I'd like to do is actually put that into the socket and then see how that actually turns, whether that's on centre or whether that's got a slight wobble to it, which when I was turning it here I saw a little bit of a shimmy. Whether that's in my mind or trick of the light or whatever, I don't know. So I'm now going to part that off and move on from there. Here I am about to put the groove in the shaft down here. It only needs to be, I think it's 114 thou on diameter. So what's that, 57 on radius? So not a big problem there. I've got my pipe centre mounted up here. Now I measured that and there's a slight bit of run out there. I'm not going to chase that now. The way I've got this set up, because I've got a length of material here, even if this is out a little bit, provided that's dead nuts on, it's going to be a lever arm effect, that the different distance from there to there versus the distance from there to there means that small amount of run out there is going to be much reduced down here, and as it's only for a retaining ring, it doesn't really matter too much. How to fix that? Well, really the only way I can do that is to make up a socket for that. So make that up in the chuck, don't touch it, put that in there, and then do a skim pass there. I'm only looking at around about 0.1 TIR, 0.1 of a millimetre TIR, so it's not something that's high on my list of priorities. It'll probably become very high one day, and then I'll think, damn, I should have fixed that. But at the moment, it's not an issue for me. One tip when trying to measure run out with an indicator like this on a conical surface is just watch carefully what the tip is doing, because it can tend to unscrew the tip from the end of the indicator, and so you get an error coming from that unscrewing. As you can see with this, I've got just a little bit of under 0.1 of a millimetre run out, and using the method I did, it should have been pretty much spot on, but there were a few interruptions and all that sort of stuff, so without wishing to make excuses for myself, I can understand why that's happened. So yes, it needs a bit of truing up perhaps. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this has been useful for some people, even if it's how not to do things, and see you next one.